Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Malcheski. I am your president-elect of your board. I use the pronouns he, him, and I have the honor of being your worship associate for today's service. As we begin today's service, let's put our hearts and minds and cell phones into worship mode. We welcome everyone here and those joining us online to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke, with a special welcome to those of you that are joining us for the very first time. It is our sincere hope that you will find this to be your spiritual home. We also invite newcomers and our regular members to attend a coffee hour directly after the service in the fellowship hall for coffee and conversation. And let's take a moment to connect with everyone that's joining us online via YouTube. So if you would please turn around and wave to the camera as it pans through the sanctuary. And for those of you that are joining us online today, if you have any joys or concerns that you would like us to acknowledge during today's service, if you would please put those into chat in the next 15 minutes. We acknowledge that our church resides on the traditional lands of the Tutelo and Monacan nations. This land was later farmed and developed through the use of slave labor. We recognize and respect the ongoing connection to this land by generations of Black and Indigenous people of color. May our gratitude and fellowship here echo and honor that rich history. Our minister is the Reverend Walter LaFleur. He is currently off on medical leave. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we send him healing thoughts of love and light. Our sermon today is Why Metaphor Matters, spiritually speaking. And the sermon will be given by our very own Jean Larson. Our words of welcome. So please join me in reciting our words of welcome shown on the screen. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you express your identity, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy, as you come seeking love, your presence here is a gift. Whether you are filled with sadness, overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself, or eager to engage with others, all who welcome all are welcome here. The reading of our covenant, please join me in reading the words on the screen. We commit to supporting each other with respect and direct communication as we work in community to explore spiritual growth to be a force for good in the world. Carrie? Our opening words. The metamorphosis of nature shows itself in nothing more than this: that there is no word in our language that cannot become typical to us of nature by giving it emphasis. The world is a dancer. It is a rosary. It is a torrent. It is a boat, a mist, a spider's snare. It is what you will, and the metaphor will hold. Swifter than light, the world transforms itself into the living thing you name. That was by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do our chalice lighting next. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage.
Hello, my name is Jessie. I'm the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here at UCR. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to invite forward anybody who wants to see the illustrations of this book. So if you are young at heart, really anxious to see some pictures, come on forward. Little ones can sit right here, and I'll tell you a little bit about this book. This book was given to me when I was really small. It's by Fred Gwynne, who some might recognize as a famous actor. But he took a lot of, when I was little, adults would say things that I just didn't understand. And this book is all about those things that adults say that we don't understand. And it's called The King Who Reigned. And what do you see on the cover? A king who's reigning. And for those of you who can't see it, this is a king who is a rain cloud. These types of words are called homophones. And we'll talk about that a little bit too later. Daddy says there was a king who reigned for 40 years. Daddy says there are forks in the road. Daddy says he has a mole on his nose. Mommy says lambs gamble on the lawn. And for those that can't see, we've got a really hot poker game going between some baby sheep. Sometimes Mommy says she has a frog in her throat. Has someone ever said that to you, that they have a frog in their throat? Other times, she says she's a little horse and needs the throat spray. And when I give it to her, she says I'm a little deer. Are you ever a little deer? No, it's like, oh, absolutely not. My big sister's getting married, and she says I can hold up her train. It's a strong kid. Daddy says next time he paints the house, he's going to give it 2 coats. Daddy says there's a head on his beer. That was a little creepy. Daddy says all we get in the mail are big bills. That's okay. They're still attached to the birds, and the birds are hanging out of the mailbox. Mommy says not to bother her when she's playing bridge. Do you ever play bridge? Probably not like that. Daddy says our family has a coat of arms. Ew. Would you wear that coat? No. Daddy says that we should live in the present. Mommy says little children always have bare feet. I've heard Daddy talk about the footprints in the snow. See, that Prince has lovely feet on his jacket. And the blueprints for the new room in our house. Daddy says some boars are coming over for dinner. Did you ever hear such a bunch of fairy tales? You see, all those fairies have tails. And some of these things the adults were laughing at that you guys weren't laughing at because you didn't quite know what they meant. So we're going to take a little time when we go upstairs to explain those things to you guys. And remember, sometimes when adults talk about things, and adults could deal with remembering this as well, sometimes when adults talk about things, we, as kids, and I'm putting myself in that category too, don't always know exactly what they're talking about. And you can always say, hey, what do you mean? Y'all ready to head upstairs? Let's follow Randall.
Our first reading. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? That was a reading from Harlem by Langston Hughes. And now invite Claire English up for our second reading.
Your World by Georgia Douglas Johnson. Your world is as big as you make it, I know, for I used to abide in the narrowest nest in the corner, my wings pressing close to my side. But I sighted a distant horizon where the skyline encircled the sea, and I throbbed with a burning desire to travel this immensity. I battered the cordons around me and cradled my wings on the breeze, then soared to the uttermost reaches with rapture, with power, with ease.
Good morning. Weren't those great readings? Well, let us live in the present, right? It's good to be together on Super Bowl Sunday. You still have plenty of time to get home, crank up the Taylor Swift, and start making the guacamole. Or put on your Niners t-shirt, whatever. I want to underline this is a sermon, not an English class, and I am here to tell you that the making and recognition of metaphors is a valuable spiritual exercise, one that helps us grasp the actual nature of reality. Also, I'm saying that tuning into metaphor helps us to be better people. Exercising our metaphor muscles, that's actually a metaphor, metaphor muscles, build skills we need, and we'll get to that. But first, I know perfectly well that there are at least 17 people in this room who would like to point out that the famous Langston Hughes poem that Gordon just nailed has 5 similes, not metaphors, until the lone powerful metaphor at the end. I'm also dead certain that those 17 you use, if asked, could quickly explain that a simile uses like or as, and a metaphor does not. But a metaphor happens when someone like Georgia Douglas Johnson, whose poem Claire just gave us, describes how she stopped pressing her wings in close and then cradled them on the breeze and soared. Well, I got to tell you, Johnson was a remarkable woman, but she didn't really have wings. And as far as I know, she could not fly. She's talking about some other part of herself, right? Her psyche, let's say, by claiming to talk about a different thing, a pair of featherly forelimbs. That's a bold move. It's metaphor. Now, if we were in a class, I think someone from the UUCR writers group might pipe up about now and bring up that old revision trick of changing similes into metaphors by dropping the like or as, which in current taste at least kind of makes a braver, brasher kind of statement, that A is B. After all, Johnson's "I battered the cordons around me" makes her point about socially constructed barriers more powerfully than if she'd written, "I battered the misogyny and systemic racism that, like a line of police officers standing between me and my goal, a cordon, attempted to hold me back." And then another person in our non-existent classroom might point out that Hughes actually, in his poem, makes brilliant use of the difference in punch power between simile and metaphor. He follows that kind of sun-beaten raisin with 4 more striking similes. Harlem is like a sore spot. It's like some rotting meat. It's like a gooey piece of candy turning into crusty slime. It's like the heavy burden or invisible knapsack for my fellow Peggy McIntosh fans, like that burden that's carried by people who don't have white privilege. But then the poet follows the simile with the sucker punch of full-on metaphor. He asks us about Harlem, is it a ticking time bomb? Does it explode? Well, if we did get into all that English class stuff, I suspect that more than 17 people would be out of here, so let's not. We'll just agree that simile is metaphor's wimpy kid sister, metaphorically speaking, and we won't fret about the difference. It's that whole mode of thinking that I'm here to preach about. So let's consider, metaphor doesn't just show up in poems like maybe the work of the poet called David Ben Yishai, David son of Jesse, whose psalm lyrics include lines like, "The Lord is my shepherd." Really, metaphors are all over the place, right? They're in ads, they're in proverbs, they're in speeches, they're in sermons. Like the sermon preached by Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, when he told his listeners, "All things are on fire." Well, that makes his point about the ephemeral nature of our world and our lives. Our whole language is chock full of metaphors. This place is a zoo. My boss is a rat. The UUCR staff are angels on steroids. They are, man. So there's a whole school of linguistics that points to the centrality of metaphor in human language. For one thing, aren't those grunts that we call words basically using one thing to indicate another? I mean, the sounds that make up dog, or Lechien, or der Hund, or go, are not actually old Fido, right? That means, according to these scholars, that the relationship of any word to the thing it refers to is a lot like the relationship between a dried up raisin and a certain area of Manhattan. But here's what's cool. There's also neuroscientists who track what happens in various areas of our brains when we take in or produce metaphors. Unfortunately, the articles are sort of beyond my capacity to digest and give back to you, but I can tell you, the scientists confirm that something happens in here when metaphor happens. Lobes light up. The brain's executive functions are invoked when we deal with metaphor. Hemispheres, or actually more properly areas linked by neural circuits, connect. As the scientist and philosopher of cognitive linguistics George Lakoff put it in 2014, quote, "There is no one module in the brain that handles language or metaphor or abstract thought. It takes extensive cascade circuits linking many diverse brain regions to allow for the indefinitely large variety of human reason and imagination." The whole brain. So yeah, metaphors affect us. They literally shape our brains. Those circuits get reinforced and strengthened, da-da-da-da. They give rise to powerful emotions. When you hear the Buddha's words regarding transience, all things are on fire. You feel the burn, right? Similarly, when you call someone a pastor, a shepherd, right, etymologically, that carries different overtones from saying padre, father, or clergywoman. Shift metaphors and you shift not just the vibe, you shift your perspective, your worldview even. Maybe all things aren't kindling and tinder and fuel. Maybe they're mirrors reflecting eternity. Your call. So let me ask you, is death the grim reaper or the big sleep? Is it a rainbow bridge or is it time for a swan song? And I'm looking at you, choir, with that swan song. It's gorgeous. Is it a bucket getting kicked? Doesn't your particular answer, your metaphor of choice, affect how you spend your time before you cash in your chips or buy the farm or knock, knock, knock on heaven's door? The cool thing is, and here's where I start getting really sermony, knowing that phenomena have multiple metaphors, knowing that the metaphor one person sees isn't necessarily the one someone else sees, that can teach us the flexibility that we need. We need that flexibility in our individual lives, which as far as I can tell these days, are basically, and yeah, metaphor alert, Advent calendars with 365 or 6 little doors, and every day you open one, and a cuckoo bird pops out going, uh-oh, 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 uh-oh. But you might see life as a box of chocolates, or a treadmill made of sandpaper, or a ride on a beautiful blue boat. Here's the deal. Just making a little list like that does stuff for us. 1, since I also love that blue boat metaphor, I'm forced to move beyond the discomfort of holding 2 somewhat contradictory metaphors in my mind. Right? Advent calendar, boat. It teaches me not to cling rigidly to the one correct answer. After all, I might need both, or a combination, or a third I haven't encountered yet. So that's good for our personal thinking. A second benefit of considering multiple metaphors, it also reminds us of the value of pluralism, of understanding that any human community, nation, global network contains a whole lot of different perspectives, metaphors, for just about anything. If I'm a cuckoo Advent calendar person, it behooves me to think that you might be riding the train to glory. And that doesn't mean either of us is wrong. It just means if we're going to communicate effectively, we would do well to learn and remember which ruling metaphors are shaping each other's actions. So you remember the 6 values that we heard about in that great presentation last Sunday. These are the ones that you use nationwide are currently considering formally adopting as part of the whole UUA bylaws revision thing. Well, in addition to pluralism, right, that I just mentioned, those 6 values also lift up transformation. I quote from the proposal, "Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritage." So when we spend time considering and playing with metaphors, we remind ourselves of the crucial worth of embracing transformation and adapting to the changing world. Yes, it's possible to seize on one metaphor that nails it. It's the perfect truth. Let's say the USA, we are a shining city on a hill, period. Always been that way, always will be. Or, we're in Imperial Rome watching the Colosseum burn while a bunch of clowns play fiddles, and that's all there is to it. But isn't either one of those metaphors alone awfully reductive? What if our nation is a little bit of both? Shining city and scary clown show. Well, as the proposed 6 values statement for pluralism puts it, quoting again, embrace our differences. And on the interpersonal level, that sense of manifold possible metaphors for whatever subject is at hand can help us develop empathy for people who just don't think the way we do. That empathy is something we need. Ralph Waldo Emerson knew this. Remember the opening words? They come from a lecture of his that focused on the way things change and change and change. Emerson lists some pretty amazing metaphors for the world, right? A dancer, a boat, a spider web. And then he says, any metaphor you come up with for the realm of our experience, the world, any metaphor will work. That object, a rosary was another one, right? Becomes a true window into the nature of this place. Now, I'm starting to encroach on a sermon I gave here 20 years ago, so I'll stop. But I think Emerson makes a pretty convincing argument for accepting even the weirdo metaphors that the weirdo other people use. So, okay, rigid orthodoxy is kind of dumb or harmful to effective human interaction, but you already knew that. That's one reason you're part of this particular faith community, right? But can thinking about, playing with, making metaphor teach us more about what's good? Well, yes, it can. If we're seeing what is similar in two things that are ostensibly dissimilar, if we're grooving on a metaphor, then we're building some other mental muscles. We are enhancing our capacity for pattern recognition. And that pattern recognition thing is crucial to all kinds of good stuff. Artistic creativity, for sure, but also hypothesis formation in scientific research, innovation in entrepreneurship, and problem solving in general. Also, the perception of patterns like social injustice or the dangerous changes in the system of currents circulating in the North Atlantic Ocean, that pattern recognition, which thinking in metaphor mode helps us learn how to do and do better, is the first step toward taking action. But I can't chase the pattern recognition rabbit any further, so I'll just point out that it, along with its twin sister or daughter or whatever, pattern formation, those are essential thinking tools, tools for living a meaningful life, and metaphor helps us get there. As the great philosopher Wikipedia puts it, probably plagiarizing, it wasn't footnoted, a metaphor creates new links between otherwise distinct conceptual domains. Distinct conceptual domains, metaphor creates new links. Cool, huh? Actually, though, you can guess it is an Emersonian kind of. I'm going to correct Madame Wikipedia, the philosopher, and say that the links are already there. I'm going to say that metaphor works because the things we may think are separate, disconnected, walled off, are actually already interconnected. Metaphor is grounded in the reality that the two parts of the metaphor, if this were an English class, I would call them the tenor and the vehicle, right? The thing we are pointing toward, Harlem under an oppressive social system, and the thing we use to point with, a time bomb. Both of those things, and we ourselves are part of, another quote, the interdependent web of all existence. Web. Oh, man, the seventh principle is a metaphor. Well, as that linguist George Lakoff once said, much subject matter, from the most mundane to the most abstruse scientific theories, can only be comprehended as metaphor. So metaphor is powerful. Respect it, use it. Two last things before we wrap up. Asbestos gloves and coffee hour. Coffee first. This is not a class, so I can't give you homework, but practice is good. So remember during COVID lockdown when we were all getting together on Zoom, and there were small group chats after the service, and often we were given a particular kind of icebreaker subject to chat about afterwards if we chose. So if you choose, and if you're here in person, maybe stick around in the fellowship hall and you kind of trade metaphors for life. What is life? See what you believe, come up with new ones. Is it a cabaret, old chums? Is it a battlefield or pilgrimage? So who goes for a box of chocolates? Come on, let me see some hands. Right, it's on the list, yeah. Including a few spitbacks, all right. And now the asbestos gloves. That's a metaphor that the poet Adrienne Rich used for something else, poetic form, which was a thing that enabled her, she said, as a young writer to write about, quote, materials I couldn't pick up barehanded. Well, I say metaphor helps us that way too. Metaphor helps us speak truths that are too hot, too messy, too painful to be spelled out directly. That's what Langston Hughes and Georgia Douglas Johnson did. How, after all, does one express in a way that can be grasped, a way that can be heard, the hideous realities behind their poems? Metaphor. That's how they did it. Were Hughes and Johnson better off for having made those poems? I don't doubt it for a minute. Are countless others better off for having heard or read them? You bet. We learn via metaphor about others' experiences. We learn from that about our own. So doing, we improve our capabilities for thought and emotion both. And metaphor is the key that opens the door. Thank you.
For our offering, the work of this church requires the time, talent, and treasures of many people. As we collect today's offering, know that your generous gifts will go towards furthering the mission of our church. Thank you. Thank you for your support to help the church pursue the good work in our community. Your generosity is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Linda Wood. It's my honor to represent the Caring Committee this morning. If you have something that you would like to share with the community as a whole, you are always welcome to do that by contacting a member of the Caring Committee or leaving a message in the church office or putting it in the Lifelines book, which is on the altar or in the alcove by the name tags during the week. So into this sacred space, we bring one joy and one concern this morning. And I'll tell you the concern first. Tim Andriano is not doing well. He has been moved from Salem Rehab to Roanoke Memorial. The good news about that is that his niece came from Chicago. She arrived last night. So she is here now to be his support and advocate. So please keep Tim in your heart. The good news, we collected $1,900 during the month of January in the special collections for Sarah, the Sexual Assault Response and Awareness. Thank you for your generosity and support, and our next special collection will be in March for the NAACP. So this is your opportunity now to come forward and light a candle. If you have something in your heart that you want to express, then may the warmth of that candle bring warmth to your heart. May the light of these candles bring warmth to your soul and peace to your heart.
Our prayer. Let us open our minds and our hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of the pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. Our announcements. We need to get your feedback on a service we are planning for the fall season. Nalini Holly, are you with us here today? No? Okay. All right, so we will be looking for some feedback on a future service that we're going to be having in the fall. So you'll be hearing more about that later. So our next announcement comes from the Connections Committee, which we're very, very excited about. And you'll see they've got a wonderful setup in the fellowship hall. So if you're interested in helping out our church, but don't have time for an ongoing commitment, and we realize many of you are very, very busy, the Connection team has come up with a very easy way for you to help us reach out to people we haven't seen in a while. So members of the committee will be in the fellowship hall after the service, and will provide you with information on how you can either make a phone call or write a handwritten card to those that we haven't seen for a while. And these efforts will go a long way towards rekindling those relationships and help sustaining our congregation and maybe even growing our congregation numbers. And as your president-elect, I strongly urge you to participate in this very important project, and it will be ongoing as well. Another very important program you can assist with is Family Promise. This program helps temporary homeless families with children. Heading up this effort will be our very own Jerry Trammell. In addition to making wonderful signs, he will be in the fellowship hall to sign you up and answer your questions. So there you have it, 2 great ways for you to help out our church and the greater community. And then finally, announcements can be found in the weekly email newsletter. If you're not receiving it and would like to do so, you can email our church administrator at admin@uuroanoke.org. That's admin@uuroanoke.org. And that concludes our announcements for today's service.
The closing music is Who Book Home, and the words will be on the screen in front of you. Thank you. Which I forgot to tell Sarah about, but she knows now. So let's all stand and sing. You'll recognize the tune, I promise.
Still my cry, the Lord can save.
before our final benediction, I'd just like to give a heartfelt thanks to our staff, the choir, and all the volunteers that put this service together. You may not realize it probably takes approximately 30 or 40 people to put together a service like this. So if you would please, if you get a chance, the participants are listed in the order of service. When you see them at coffee hour, if you could just extend a word of thanks. Our benediction. If here you have found freedom, take it into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some to a bruised and hurting world. Our service is now ended. Go in peace.